Ava Brooks slammed the front door shut behind her, keys jangling in one hand, phone clutched in the other. Her heart raced as she darted down the porch steps, heels clicking against the pavement, mind already spiraling through the mountain of tasks waiting at work. The sun had barely risen over their quiet suburban street in New Jersey, but the weight of the day pressed heavy on her shoulders. Behind her, the house was still humming with the chaos of morning diapers, toys, emails, buzzing unanswered, but Ava had no choice. She couldn't lose this job, not after everything, not with the bills stacking up on the kitchen counter like an accusation. Inside, 2-year-old Liam babbled from his high care, oatmeal smeared across his cheeks, while Marissa hovered nearby, swiping strands of blonde hair behind her ear. The nanny was young, maybe 24, hired in desperation just 2 weeks ago through an agency Ava barely had time to vet. But Marissa had smiled politely, her references had checked out, and Ava needed help. Desperately. "You okay?" Ava asked, pausing in the doorway as she adjusted the strap of her bag. Her eyes flicked toward Liam, then back to Marissa. "Don't worry," Marissa replied, offering a tired smile. "I've got him." Ava hesitated, maternal instinct twisting in her gut, but the clock was merciless. She leaned down, kissing Liam's soft curls. His tiny fingers reached for her, and guilt clawed at her chest. Still, she straightened, muttering promises under her breath, and slipped out the door. The camera lingered behind her, inside the house, as Marissa sank onto the couch. Her phone lit up with notifications, texts, likes, unread messages, piling up. Her thumb scrolled absently, eyes already glassy with exhaustion. The morning sun streaked through the curtains, warm and quiet, as her eyelids fluttered shut. Outside, the world moved on. The screen fades to black. Hours later, Ava sat in the glass-walled conference room, fingers trembling as she reviewed a spreadsheet. Her phone buzzed on the table beside her hand, unknown number. Her stomach flipped. She hesitated, then answered. The voice on the other end was panicked. Distantly, screams echoed, neighbors shouting, chaos unraveling, sirens wailing in the background. "Ava Brooks," the voice demanded. "You need to come home. There's been an accident." Ava's heart plummeted. The scene cuts to the suburban street outside her house, now flooded with red and blue lights. Neighbors clustered in disbelief, paramedics rushing toward the front door. The nanny fell asleep and everything changed. Ava Brooks could barely remember the last time she felt rested. At 32, her life had become an endless, exhausting rotation of responsibilities. Early mornings with Liam, late nights at her new job, constant tension crackling between her and Derek, and an ever-present sense that everything was one wrong move away from collapse. Their tidy New Jersey home, with its manicured lawn and cheerful shutters, looked perfect from the outside. Another cookie-cutter piece of suburbia, but inside, the walls felt like they were closing in. Ava hadn't always lived like this. She used to believe hard work led somewhere, college degrees, career milestones, building a family. But life, especially after Liam, had rewritten the rules. Derek losing his job 6 months ago had been the final blow. He told her it was temporary, told her he was figuring things out, but months dragged by. Savings drained, and the man she married drifted into someone unrecognizable. He spent more time locked away in his home office than he did with them, snapping at simple questions, avoiding her eyes when she asked about money. The bills piled up faster than the explanations. Mortgage, late fees, medical expenses, groceries all landed squarely on Ava's shoulders. When the offer came for her, new job at a boutique marketing firm in the city, she took it, even though it meant 12-hour days and a commute that frayed her nerves. It was barely enough to keep them afloat, but without it, they'd drown. That's how Marissa entered the picture. The nanny agency had sent over a few profiles, but most were laughably out of reach financially. Marissa's file looked good, enough CPR, certified, glowing references, college coursework in early childhood development. But Ava barely had time to dig deeper. She met Marissa once, shook her hand, noted the clean clothes, the calm smile, and signed the papers. It wasn't ideal. It was survival. Marissa was 24, polite, wide-eyed, and, as Ava would later learn, struggling beneath the surface. She'd been couch surfing for months, drifting between friends' apartments, the occasional stint with her older sister when they weren't fighting. The job with Ava's family was supposed to be her lifeline, a stable paycheck, a roof over her head, a fresh start. But stability was hard to fake. Marissa was overwhelmed. She wasn't used to toddlers, wasn't used to the heavy responsibility pressed into her hands. She told herself she could handle it. But the exhaustion, the constant hum of anxiety, the sleepless nights, the secrets she carried chipped away at her facade. Ava sensed it, though she never voiced it outright. She caught the small signs, the distracted glances, the late arrivals, the faint circles under Marissa's eyes, but options were limited. The cost of daycare was impossible. Family help was non-existent. Derek was too consumed with his own secrets to lift the burden. So Ava convinced herself to believe Marissa's promises, clung to the illusion of safety, and poured every ounce of energy into surviving her workday. At home, the cracks deepened. The arguments with Derek grew sharper, meaner. Ava accused him of hiding things, money problems, maybe something worse. He deflected, defensive, insisting he was handling it, that she needed to trust him. But the late-night phone calls in hushed tones, the way his bank statements never seemed to add up, it gnawed at her. Their neighbors, with their picture-perfect lawns and polite smiles, watched from behind curtains. They waved at Ava in the mornings, complimented Liam's curly hair. But the undercurrent of gossip buzzed beneath every interaction. In a small, tightly wound community like theirs, bad news traveled fast. Ava's new job was her last shot. Her boss was demanding, the workload relentless. And every morning she left the house knowing one mistake, one late report, one missed deadline could cost her everything. She couldn't afford mistakes. She couldn't afford doubts. But those doubts followed her, lingering in the pit of her stomach as she handed Liam over to Marissa each morning, forcing herself to smile, to trust, to believe the lies they were, all telling themselves. The truth was, none of them were stable. Not Derek, not Marissa, not Ava. They were all just barely holding it together, pretending the cracks weren't widening. But deep down, Ava knew it was only a matter of time before it all shattered. The morning of the incident began like so many others, frantic, tense, drowning in unspoken resentment. Ava stood at the mirror, smoothing down her blazer, rehearsing the lines of her presentation under her breath. Today was critical. The account she'd been chasing for weeks was finally within reach and landing. It meant stability, maybe even a promotion. They needed this. The mortgage, the bills, the quiet judgment radiating from Derek as he sulked in the kitchen. She could barely stand the weight of it all. She glanced toward the living room, where Marissa sat cross-legged on the floor, half-heartedly building blocks with Liam. Her eyes were glassy, skin pale, and though she tried to hide it, Ava could see the faint tremor in her hands. The telltale signs of a long night. Marissa's social media had shown glimpses of it earlier. Crowded bars, drinks clinking, selfies with friends. Ava's stomach twisted, but she swallowed the concern. There wasn't time for confrontation. "You okay?" Ava asked tightly, adjusting the strap of her bag. Marissa forced a smile, her voice dry, slightly hoarse. "Yeah, of course, I'll be fine. I've got him," Liam babbled happily, oblivious to the storm building around him. Ava leaned down, pressed a kiss to his head, and forced herself out the door. The guilt followed her all the way to the train. By the time she reached the city, Ava's nerves were fraying. Her boss barked last-minute instructions. Her teammates hovered anxiously. She rehearsed her pitch, tapping her fingers against the conference table, determined to prove herself. If today went well, everything could change. The weight could lift just enough to breathe, but 2 blocks away, the foundation was already cracking. Back home, Marissa's resolve unraveled fast. The hangover pulsed behind her eyes as she settled onto the couch, Liam playing quietly with his toys. The morning sun filtered through the curtains, warm, soft, lulling. Her phone buzzed with unread messages, and for a moment, her eyelids drifted shut, just for a second. She told herself she never heard the back door creak open. Liam, small and curious, slipped outside into the yard, his tiny footsteps padding. Across the patio, the latch on the back gate hadn't clicked properly. Derek had promised to fix it weeks ago. Beyond the gate, the sidewalk stretched toward the busy intersection at the end of the street. Cars whipping past, neighbors' lawns, perfectly trimmed. It was Mrs. Hollis from next door who spotted him first. Her shriek echoed down the street as she bolted across her lawn, scooping Liam into her arms just feet from the curb. His cheeks were streaked with tears, his cries piercing through the quiet morning. The police arrived within minutes, sirens wailing, lights flashing. Neighbors clustered on their porches, whispering behind cupped hands. Marissa jolted awake to the pounding on the door, her heart slamming against her ribs as officers filled the living room, questions flying faster than she could process. By the time Child Protective Services arrived, Marissa's pale face and trembling voice did nothing to calm the storm. They assessed, documented, and made their decisions swiftly, standard procedure when negligence was suspected. Liam was removed from the home pending investigation. Ava was mid-sentence in her presentation when her phone buzzed. She tried to ignore it, but the call came again, a known number, urgency bleeding through the screen. Her heart seized as she stepped out of the conference room, pressing the phone to her ear. The voice on the other end was clinical but heavy with implication. "Mrs. Brooks, there's been an incident with your son." Ava's vision blurred, panic roaring in her chest as the words tumbled out. "Police, Child Protective Services, temporary removal." Her knees buckled against the hallway wall. The humiliation, the terror, the unbearable weight of it all crushed down in an instant. By the time she stumbled through the front door of her home, officers were still present, neighbors watching from across the street like vultures. Derek's face was thunderous, his voice sharp and dripping with accusation. "This is what happens," he spat, "when you put your damn job before your family." Ava's chest caved with the weight of his words, rage and shame warring beneath her skin. She opened her mouth to defend herself, to scream, to collapse, but it didn't matter. CPS had made their decision. Liam was gone. The investigation had begun, and nothing about their carefully curated life would ever look the same again. The days following the incident blurred into a relentless storm of humiliation, fear, and suffocating uncertainty. Ava barely slept, barely ate, existing in the sterile, grey fog of social service meetings, legal documents, and whispered judgments that seemed to follow her everywhere. Child Protective Services moved fast agents, combed through every corner of her life with clinical precision, inspecting the house, scrutinizing financial records, asking invasive questions about her parenting, her marriage, her mental state. Every misplaced item, every unpaid bill, every moment of exhaustion was weaponized against her, painted as proof of instability. Marissa was gone, disappeared like smoke. The agency had no answers. Her phone went straight to voicemail, and Ava's texts remained unread. It was as if the young woman had evaporated, abandoning the wreckage she'd left behind. Ava's stomach twisted with anger and fear, but mostly with the bitter knowledge that trusting Marissa had been a desperate gamble that had cost her everything. The neighborhood turned cold overnight. The same neighbors who once smiled politely at the end of the driveway now barely met her gaze. The whispers were impossible to ignore at the grocery store, in passing at the post office, at the park where Liam used to play. Parents clutched their children tighter when Ava passed. Friends she'd leaned on for years grew distant, their messages clipped, their support evaporating under the weight of scandal. But nothing compared to what unraveled behind closed doors. Derek's anger was a constant, simmering presence. It clung to him like a second skin, infecting every conversation, every moment of silence between them. The night after CPS officially confirmed Liam wouldn't be returned until the investigation concluded, Derek finally cracked. His resentment, sharp and ugly, poured out in bitter, unfiltered waves. "I wasn't job hunting," he admitted, voice low, and shaking, his eyes bloodshot with sleeplessness and guilt. "I've been gambling." Ava stared at him, the words taking too long to sink in, her pulse roaring in her ears. He paced the living room, hands dragging through his hair. "Online, mostly. But sometimes in the city, I thought I could fix it, win it back, just get us out of this hole." Her chest constricted, the foundation of their already crumbling marriage cracking wide open. The financial strain, the unpaid bills, the missing money, it all made sense now. And the realization gutted her. "You lied to me," she whispered, voice hollow. "You let me believe I didn't mean for it to go this far." He cut in, defensive, wounded pride bleeding through. "But you were so wrapped up in work, in keeping it all together. I didn't know how to fix it, Ava, and now look where we are." The blame was subtle but sharp, an accusation hidden beneath every word. Ava felt abandoned, betrayed by Derek, by Marissa, by the fragile illusion of stability she'd been clinging to for months. Her marriage was collapsing under the weight of secrets, and her son, her baby, was gone. The legal battle loomed next, heavy and unforgiving. The threat of negligence charges hung in the air like a guillotine. Ava sat in endless meetings with her lawyer, dissecting every moment of that morning. Every decision she'd made, hiring Marissa, leaving for work, trusting a stranger with Liam. Her parental fitness was under microscopic scrutiny, and every crack in her life, financial instability, marital tension, emotional exhaustion fed into the narrative that maybe, just maybe, she wasn't capable. CPS floated the possibility of placing Liam with Derek's mother. Margareta, manipulative, bitter woman who had despised Ava from the beginning. Margaret had never hidden her disdain, always blaming Ava for taking Derek away, for the family falling apart, for everything that followed. She wielded judgment like a weapon, sharp and relentless. And now she circled like a vulture, eager to sweep in and rescue Liam. Ava's gut churned with dread at the thought. Margaret's home was a gilded cage cold, controlling, suffocating. It wasn't where Liam belonged. But the system didn't care about nuance, didn't see the quiet private fractures beneath the surface. They saw boxes to check, risks to mitigate, and Ava's world painted in shades of grey that increasingly looked like failure. Alone in the house, stripped of her purpose, Ava battled a constant churn of self-doubt and anxiety. She questioned everything: her instincts, her choices, her worth as a mother. Every morning, she woke to the echoing absence of Liam's laughter, the suffocating quiet of an empty nursery, and the creeping fear that she might lose him forever. The only person still in her corner was Jenna, her older sister, fierce and unwavering, the one voice cutting through the noise with relentless determination. You have to fight. Jenna told her one sleepless night, sitting at the kitchen table, her eyes hard with resolve. They're coming after you, Ava. The system, the rumors, even Derek's mess. You fight for Liam, you fight for yourself, but the weight of it, all the betrayal, the legal maze, the public humiliation threatened to drown her. Ava wanted to fight. She just wasn't sure how much of herself was left to stand on. The breaking point came when Ava could no longer stomach the silence, the unanswered questions, the gnawing sense that there was more to the story than a simple, tragic mistake. She had spent sleepless nights replaying the incident, obsessing over every detail. Every decision but one thing refused to settle: Marissa's sudden disappearance. The agency dodged her calls, emails went unanswered, and even CPS shrugged, claiming Marissa was just hard to reach. It didn't sit right. None of it did. Fueled by desperation and a mother's raw instinct, Ava dug deeper. A few online searches turned into hours of scouring forums, social media threads, and obscure message boards. It was on a parenting forum that she finally found a breadcrumber, vague warning from another mother, posted months ago, about the same nanny agency Ava had used. The words sliced through her. Asterisk, they'll clean up any background if the check clears. Watch your back. Asterisk, the realization made Ava's blood run cold. It took days of pushing, prying, and sheer stubbornness, but she eventually tracked Marissa down. The young woman was holed up in a dingy apartment on the outskirts of town. Her wide, exhausted eyes filled with guilt the moment she opened the door. Ava's heart hammered in her chest as she stepped inside. The place reeked of stale alcohol and regret. Marissa, once bright-eyed and polished, looked fragile, trembling, a shell of the person Ava thought she knew. You lied, Ava accused, voice low but trembling with fury. You lied about everything. Marissa collapsed onto the threadbare couch, head in her hands. The confession spilled out in broken pieces. How she'd struggled with addiction for years. How neglect accusations from a previous babysitting job had nearly destroyed her. How the agency, desperate to stay afloat, had forged her background checks, wiped her record clean for the right price. I never should have taken the job, Marissa whispered, eyes glistening. But I was desperate. I needed the money. They promised no one would ever know. Ava's stomach twisted, bile rising in her throat. The betrayal ran deeper than she thought, but the worst was still to come. When Ava demanded to know how, Marissa even got connected with the agency. How their paths had crossed so disastrously. Marissa hesitated, then dropped the final blow. Your husband, she admitted softly. Derek. He knew someone at the agency. Said they'd cut him a deal if he recommended them. He told me you couldn't afford much, that he'd vouch for me. The room spun. Ava gripped the back of a chair to steady herself, her pulse pounding. In her ears, Derek. He had brought them into this. He had vouched for Marissa, knowing the agency's reputation was shaky. Another reckless attempt to cut corners, to patch their lives with duct tape and denial. And in doing so, he had jeopardized Liam's safety, their family, everything. The fury propelled her home, every step fueled by betrayal and disbelief. She found Derek in the kitchen, nursing a drink, the weight of his own failures etched across his face. But Ava didn't flinch. She laid it all out, the forged background. Checks, Marissa's lies, the agency's cover-up, and, most damning of all, his role in it. Derek's defenses crumbled fast, his guilt raw and exposed. I didn't know it'd turn out like this, he argued, voice cracking. I was trying to help, to save us some money. I thought you thought. Ava's voice broke, her body trembling with rage. You gambled with our lives. Derek, with Liam's life. You lied, you cut corners, you buried your failures. Now our son is gone. The argument erupted, years of resentment spilling like poison into the air. Every wound, every unspoken frustration, every crack in the marriage split wide open. Ava screamed about his gambling, his lies, his cowardice. Derek fired back with accusations about her ambition, her absence, her obsession with saving everything but their relationship. It was raw, vicious, and painfully honest. The moment their carefully constructed life finally shattered, when the shouting faded. Derek stood at the threshold, shoulders slumped, eyes empty. I can't fix this, he admitted, voice hoarse. I don't know how to fix us. And just like that, he left, slamming the door behind him, leaving Ava alone in the wreckage of their life. She stood in the quiet, her body shaking, her world unrecognizable. But beneath the devastation, something else stirred, the simmering determination to fight, to reclaim her son, to face the truth, no matter how brutal. The pieces lay broken at her feet. But Ava wasn't done yet. The days that followed were some of the hardest Ava had ever faced. But beneath the exhaustion and heartbreak, a fire ignited, a quiet, relentless determination to take her life back piece by piece. She refused to let shame or fear define her any longer. With Jenna's unwavering support at her side, Ava filed a formal complaint against the nanny agency, laying bare every deceitful layer of their operation. The forged background checks, the concealed accusations, the negligence, all of it documented, undeniable, ready to unravel the business that had jeopardized her family. The agency scrambled to defend itself, but the damage was done. Ava's lawyer, sharp and unyielding, pushed back against CPS with the newfound evidence, dismantling the narrative that Ava had been reckless or negligent. Slowly, the tide began to turn. Derek's secrets couldn't hide in the shadows anymore. Either, with Jenna's help, Ava uncovered his gambling history, credit card records, hidden debts, betting app, statements, all of it, painting a clear picture of his recklessness and deceit. The court took one look at the mountain of evidence and granted Ava temporary sole custody of Liam, cutting through the fog of suspicion that had haunted her since that awful day when Liam was finally placed back into her care. The weight of his small body in her arms felt like oxygen after months underwater. His smile, his tiny fingers gripping hers. It anchored her, reminded her why she couldn't afford to break. But Ava's fight wasn't just for Liam, it was for herself. Despite the whispers that still lingered in the community, she poured herself into her work, determined to prove her worth. Her boss, impressed by her resilience and refusal to falter under pressure, secured her position. The promotion came quietly, without fanfare, but it was hers, earned through grit and survival. At home, Ava drew hard lines. The old patterns with Derek couldn't continue. Their marriage was a casualty of years of resentment, dishonesty, and cracks that had never truly healed. With clear, unwavering resolve, Ava initiated divorce proceedings. The arguments were inevitable, but the fear that once held her hostage was gone. She chose stability, safety for herself, and for Liam over the illusion of a broken partnership. For the first time in months, Ava began to rebuild. She sought a new caregiver through trusted, community-vetted source. No shortcuts, no desperate gambles. The process was meticulous, slow, but grounded in real security. It wasn't perfect. The scars remained memories of sirens, courtrooms, betrayal, but Ava carried them with quiet strength. The storm had nearly destroyed her, but it didn't define her. She stood taller now, bruised but unbroken. A mother, a survivor, and finally, in control of her life. The house was quiet now. The chaos of the past few months faded into a fragile, hard-won calm. Ava stood by Liam's bed, watching his small chest rise and fall with each peaceful breath. His curls stuck to his forehead, his tiny hand curled loosely around hers, safe, warm, right where he belonged. The nursery, once a room that echoed with absence, now pulsed with life again. The faint hum of the baby monitor in the corner, the soft glow of the nightlight casting gentle shadows along the walls. Ava brushed a strand of hair from Liam's face, her throat tightening as tears pricked at the corners of her eyes. The exhaustion still clung to her, but beneath it was something steadier resolved. She had stumbled, she had trusted the wrong people, made desperate choices under impossible pressure, but she'd fought, she'd stood back up, clawed her way through judgment, betrayal, and heartbreak to protect the only thing that ever truly mattered. She squeezed Liam's hand gently, whispering to herself as much as to him, I failed once, never again. The weight of those words settled in her chest, not as guilt, but as a quiet promise. She couldn't rewrite the past, couldn't undo what had happened, but she could choose how to move forward. For Liam, for herself, she lingered for a moment. Longer, her tired eyes sweeping the room, the faded walls, the worn carpet, the life they were rebuilding piece by fragile piece. It wasn't perfect, but it was theirs. As she stood, tucking the blanket around her son one last time, the final thoughts settled in with quiet clarity, carrying both regret and hard-earned strength. The careless nanny fell asleep, but it woke me up. Ava turned off the light, her silhouette framed in the doorway. Tired but unbreakably, mother reclaiming her life, her way.